You know what the biggest mistake is when dealing with narcissists? It's not yelling at them. It's not fighting back. It's not even believing them. No, the biggest mistake is staying silent. That's how they win. That's how they gain ground in your life, inch by inch, moment by moment, until suddenly you wake up one day and wonder how the hell you got here feeling small, confused, drained, and maybe even questioning your own worth. Because here's the truth, narcissists don't need your love to thrive. They don't even need your attention all the time. What they really need is your silence, your non-reaction, your decision to not say anything, to not push back, to not make waves. That's the golden ticket for them. Now you might be telling yourself, well, I don't want to cause conflict, or it's just not worth it, or maybe I'm overreacting. And I get it, that internal monologue is exactly what they want running in your head. Narcissists are experts at creating an environment where speaking up feels dangerous, dramatic, or just plain exhausting. But here's the catch. Every time you hold back, every time you swallow your truth, you're teaching them one thing that they can get away with it. They learn what works. They learn what shuts you down. And once they know they can disrespect you without consequences, it becomes a blueprint. They'll repeat it, escalate it, and dress it up in different disguises. A joke here, a passive-aggressive comment there, a full-blown manipulation when they think you're too tired to fight back, and when you still don't speak. Now you're playing their game on their field with their rules. Let me ask you this, who benefits when you say nothing? It's not you. Silence doesn't protect your peace, it protects their position. Because the longer you stay quiet, the easier it is for them to twist the narrative. They start defining what's true. They paint themselves as the victim. They act like you're the problem while you're over there trying to keep it together. And somewhere deep inside, you start doubting yourself. And that right there, that doubt is where they win. See, narcissists don't overpower you all at once. They don't show up with a giant red flag screaming, hey, I'm toxic. No, they wear you down over time. They test your boundaries and pay close attention to what you tolerate. They learn your soft spots, your fears, your insecurities, and they exploit them. But none of that works unless you let it. And how do you let it? By staying silent. So let's flip that. Let's rewire the whole approach. Because the moment you open your mouth, the moment you speak your truth, ask the question, challenge the story even in the smallest way, it changes the power dynamic. You don't have to scream. You don't have to fight dirty. You just have to be willing to say, that's not okay with me. Or, I see what you're doing and I'm not participating. That's all it takes to start breaking the spell. And yes, you might lose people when you do this. That's part of the deal. But here's the hard truth. If someone leaves because you stop being silent, they were never respecting you to begin with. Your silence was the glue. And if silence is the only thing holding that relationship together, then what you've got isn't love, it's control. Don't confuse peace with silence. Real peace doesn't require you to bite your tongue every day. Real peace allows you to be you fully, freely, without having to edit yourself just to avoid someone else's ego explosion. If you want to stop letting narcissists win, the first move isn't to call them out in public or write some dramatic social media post. It's much quieter than that. It's in the small, private decision to stop shrinking, stop tiptoeing, and stop tolerating what doesn't sit right with your soul. When you stop being silent, you stop being complicit. And the moment you stop being complicit, their whole game falls apart. They only win if you don't speak. You ever notice how every time you try to reason with a narcissist, you end up feeling more confused than when you started? You walk in thinking, I'm going to set the record straight. And by the time the conversation ends, you're apologizing for something they did. That's not a coincidence. That's not miscommunication. That's the game. And the wild part is most people keep playing it without even realizing it. See, narcissists don't care about facts. They don't care about resolution. They're not interested in truth. They're interested in control. And control doesn't come from who's right, it comes from who's in charge of the narrative. So what they do is bait you. They poke you. They twist your words just enough to get a rise out of you. And once you're emotionally invested, you're stuck in their arena, trying to prove something to someone who's already decided you're wrong, no matter what you say. And let me tell you, that's exactly where they want you, because once you're on that emotional roller coaster, they're not losing. They don't care that the argument doesn't make sense. They don't care that you're making valid points. What they care about is that they've got you spinning. You're on defense. You're distracted. And most of all, you're engaged. Because understand, this narcissists win when they have your energy. Your attention is their fuel. It's not about whether you're loving them or hating them. It's about whether you're focusing on them. If they can keep you locked in, if they can make you obsess over what they said, what they meant, why they did what they did, they've already won. That mental space you're giving them, that's rent-free real estate they never deserved. You think you're having a conversation. They're playing chess. You're trying to resolve something. They're trying to dominate something. You're trying to find common ground. They're trying to stay on top. So the more you engage, the more power you give them, even if you think you're standing up for yourself. And don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you to roll over and let them walk all over you. I'm telling you, stop giving them the thing they want most, your emotional reaction, because that's the prize. The second you raise your voice, the second you defend yourself, the second you start explaining yourself to someone who has no intention of understanding you, that's when you're already in the trap. You want to know how to stop letting them win. Step out of the game. Refuse to play. That's it. That's the power move right there. You don't need to win the argument. You need to stop showing up for the battle. You need to recognize that not every invitation deserves an RSVP. Just because they say something outrageous doesn't mean you owe them your energy. Just because they throw the bait doesn't mean you need to bite. And when you stop playing, oh, it throws them off. It disarms them because they don't know how to function without that dynamic. They don't know how to keep control when you go quiet, not in a passive way, but in a solid way. In a way that says, I see exactly what you're doing and I'm not participating. That's when the dynamic shifts. That's when you stop reacting and start observing. You stop responding and start detaching. You stop trying to win and start protecting your peace. Because peace isn't passive, peace is powerful. It takes strength to walk away from manipulation. It takes clarity to know when you're being played. And it takes self-respect to say, this conversation doesn't serve me and I'm done having it. And look, they're not going to like that. They'll push harder at first. They'll provoke you. They'll try new tactics. But that's how you know it's working. When a narcissist starts scrambling, that means you've stopped feeding them. And when the supply runs dry, you have no choice but to move on or reveal their desperation. So the next time you feel that tug, that urge to explain, to defend, to prove your point, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, am I stepping into truth or stepping into their trap? Because the moment you stop playing their game, that's the moment you start winning yours. You've been told your whole life that empathy is a strength, and it is. But what nobody told you is that if you don't guard that empathy, if you don't give it direction, it can become a weapon that narcissists use against you. And that's where a lot of people get caught. Not because they're weak, not because they're naive, but because they've got big hearts and soft spirits. And narcissists know how to spot that from a mile away. You care. You want to understand. You don't want to judge too quickly. You think maybe they had a rough childhood, or maybe they're just stressed, or they didn't mean it like that. And here's what happens. You keep making room for their behavior. You keep stretching yourself thin, trying to make sense of it. And the longer you stay in that loop, the more they twist the story to suit them. Because narcissists don't see your empathy as a beautiful trait. They see it as an open door, a soft landing, a tool. They learn how to use it. They figure out that all they have to do is sprinkle a little guilt, show a little vulnerability, or play the victim card, and boom, you're hooked. You're leaning in instead of pulling away. You're making excuses for them instead of holding them accountable. Let me tell you something, you can have empathy and boundaries at the same time. You can be kind without being a doormat. You can care without sacrificing your sanity. But narcissists are banking on the fact that you won't see the difference. They want you to think that being a good person means tolerating bad behavior. That's the lie. That's the trick. And if you fall for it, you'll end up calling it compassion when it's really just self-betrayal. And I know you've probably been told that cutting someone off, standing your ground, walking away, that those things are harsh. But let me ask you something. What's more damaging, protecting your peace or slowly losing yourself while trying to rescue someone who doesn't want to be saved? There's a point where empathy turns into enabling, where your compassion becomes complicity. And if you don't recognize that line, narcissists will dance all over it while you're still trying to figure out how to be fair. Let's be clear, narcissists love emotionally intelligent people. They love people who reflect, who analyze, who take accountability. Why? Because it gives them the upper hand. You're sitting there wondering if you could have said it better, done it better, handled it better, and they're already on to their next manipulation. They don't self-reflect. They don't wonder how they hurt you. They don't sit with guilt. That's your department, and they'll gladly let you carry both sides of the emotional load. So what do? You stop letting your empathy talk over your intuition. You stop justifying what doesn't feel right. You stop rewriting someone else's bad behavior just because you want to see the good in them. It's okay to care, but don't let that care turn into captivity. Don't let your good heart keep you in a bad cycle. You can understand where someone came from without accepting where they're trying to take you. You can forgive someone's past without giving them a free pass in your present. Empathy doesn't mean sticking around for every excuse, every gaslight, every apology with no change behind it. That's not grace, that's self-neglect. Real empathy doesn't just flow out, it flows in too. You've got to have empathy for yourself, for the version of you that's tired, the version that's been worn down, the version that knows this isn't healthy but doesn't want to seem cold or heartless. Let me tell you, protecting your peace is not heartless, it's wise, it's grown, it's necessary. You're not cold for cutting off chaos. You're not mean for choosing sanity over sympathy. You're not selfish for saying, I love you, but I won't let you keep hurting me. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. So yeah, keep your empathy. That's your gift. That's your strength. But sharpen it. Guard it. Know where to pour it and where to pull it back. Because when you stop confusing empathy with tolerance, that's when you stop being their target. You ever notice how many people stay quiet not because they agree, but because they don't want to be labeled? Labeled as too sensitive, too emotional, too much. That fear of being seen as difficult keeps a lot of folks locked in unhealthy dynamics, especially with narcissists. And that's not by accident. That's part of the design. See, narcissists love to twist the narrative so that anytime you speak up for yourself, you're the problem. And that's how they keep you second guessing. You know something's off. You feel the disrespect, the manipulation, the mind games. But the moment you try to name it, suddenly you're the one making a big deal out of nothing. Or you're too dramatic or too sensitive. So instead of pushing back, you start shrinking. You bite your tongue. You tell yourself it's not worth the argument. And every time you do that, you lose a little piece of your voice. Now, here's the thing when you've got a good heart, when you genuinely care about people, that label of being difficult can feel like a threat. Because you want to be the one who brings peace. You want to be the one who's easy to be around. You want to be liked. And narcissists count on that. They use that against you. They know you don't want conflict, so they create just enough tension to keep you quiet, but not so much that it looks abusive from the outside. So what do? You downplay it. You carry the weight. You tell yourself, maybe I just need to be more patient. Maybe I need to explain it differently. Maybe I'm the one being unreasonable. And while you're in that spiral, they're sitting back perfectly comfortable because now you're fighting yourself and not them. Well, let me tell you something. Speaking up does not make you difficult. Setting boundaries does not make you mean. Having standards does not make you demanding. It makes you clear. It makes you grounded. And it makes you a whole lot harder to manipulate. The truth is, narcissists don't fear confrontation, they fear exposure. When you start asking real questions, when you start naming the patterns, when you stop pretending everything's okay just to keep the peace, they feel threatened. Not because you're wrong, but because you're waking up. You're stepping into your voice. And they know once you start doing that, their control starts slipping. And I know what some of you are thinking, what if they get mad? What if I lose the relationship? What if they say I'm the villain? And to that I say, so what? If someone walks away because you finally chose yourself, they were never really standing with you in the first place. If your silence was the glue holding that connection together, then it wasn't love, it was fear masquerading as peace. The people who truly care about you won't punish you for having a voice. They won't make you feel guilty for expressing your needs. They won't gaslight you into thinking your feelings are a burden. And if someone does all that, that's your signal, not your shame. And look, I'm not saying it's easy, is it? Choosing your truth over their comfort is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but it's also one of the most powerful. Because every time you speak up, even if your voice shakes, you're rewriting the story. You're refusing to let fear keep you small. You're refusing to let someone else define your reality. There's this illusion that being agreeable is the same thing as being kind. That staying quiet is the noble choice. That going along to get along is the high road. But that's a trap. Real kindness isn't about denying your truth to keep others comfortable. Real kindness is rooted in honesty, in integrity, in the courage to say, this doesn't work for me, even when it's uncomfortable. You were never meant to walk on eggshells in your own life. You were never meant to dilute your voice just to avoid being seen as too much. You were never meant to carry the burden of keeping the peace while someone else keeps creating chaos. So if you've been quiet to keep from being labeled, hear me on this, you don't need their approval to validate your truth. You don't need their permission to protect your peace. And you definitely don't need to shrink yourself just to fit inside a version of you that makes them feel bigger. When you stop fearing the label and start owning your voice, that's when everything starts to shift. One of the most subtle ways narcissists keep winning is by convincing you that your boundaries are the problem. They don't come out and say it directly, no, they're too clever for that. What they do is frame it. They'll call your boundaries walls. They'll say you're closed off or unforgiving or not open to growth. And because you're a thoughtful person, someone who actually wants to grow, you start to question yourself. You wonder if maybe you are being too rigid. Maybe you are holding on to something you should have let go of. And that's exactly the crack they need. See, narcissists don't respect boundaries, they test them. That's their whole strategy. The first time you say no, they don't take it seriously. The second time, they act confused. The third time, they get offended. And after that, if you're not solid, they'll have you second guessing whether you even had a right to draw the line in the first place. Let me tell you something, you're allowed to have standards. You're allowed to say, I don't accept this. You're allowed to draw the line and not justify it, not explain it, not soften it for someone else's comfort. Boundaries are not rejection. Boundaries are protection. They protect your peace, your energy, your values. And when someone takes your boundaries personally, that tells you everything you need to know. They were never interested in respecting you. They were only interested in controlling you. Now here's where people get tripped up. They confuse boundaries with confrontation. They think setting a boundary means picking a fight, but that's not what this is about. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to give a long speech. You don't even have to justify it. You can set a boundary quietly, firmly, and with zero drama. The power isn't in the volume, it's in the clarity. But here's the kicker: narcissists thrive in unclear spaces. That's why they hate boundaries. Boundaries cut through the fog. Boundaries make things plain. Boundaries say, here's what I allow. Here's what I don't. And once that's out there, they can't twist it. They can't manipulate it. And they definitely can't pretend they didn't know better. You ever set a boundary with a narcissist and suddenly they start playing the victim? That's another move in the playbook. Wow, I guess I'm just the bad guy now. Or you've changed. Or you're really cold lately. They throw those lines out to make you feel guilty. And if you're not grounded, it works. You backpedal. You start over-explaining. You soften the line just enough for them to step right over it again. This is why emotional clarity matters. You can't set a strong boundary if you're still trying to win their approval. You've got to get honest with yourself about what you value more, your peace or their validation. Because you can't have both. Not with a narcissist. They'll make sure of that. Now listen, I get it. Some of why all were raised in environments where boundaries were seen as selfish, where being nice meant saying yes to everything, where speaking up was met with punishment. So now as an adult, the idea of holding your ground feels unnatural, even wrong. But that's not your fault. That's conditioning. And it's time to unlearn it. Your boundary is not the problem. Your lack of boundary is what created the problem in the first place. Because without boundaries, you're open to anything. You become a sponge for other people's dysfunction. And narcissists love that. They love people who keep the door open no matter how many times they disrespect the house. But you get to decide when that ends. You get to decide who has access to you. You get to decide what behavior is acceptable in your world and what isn't. That's not rude. That's responsible. And if someone tries to guilt you, shame you, or paint you as the villain for drawing the line, good. Let them. Let them reveal themselves, because the people who belong in your life will celebrate your growth, not punish you for it. When you stop apologizing for your boundaries, narcissists stop having access to your life. There comes a moment in your journey, especially when you've dealt with a narcissist, when you realize the most powerful move you can make isn't fighting back, it's moving forward. And not just physically walking away, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually detaching from the version of yourself that got caught in the cycle. Because narcissists don't just take your time or your energy, they take your identity if you let them. You start out strong, you know who you are, what you stand for, what you're building. But then little by little, they chip away at it. Not all at once, because if they tried that, you'd see it coming. No, they do it subtly. With backhanded compliments, with dismissive comments, with just enough gaslighting to make you question your own reality. And over time, your confidence gets quieter. Your intuition gets dimmer. You start doubting yourself. Not because something's wrong with you, but because they needed you to feel off balance in order to control you. And here's the wild part: sometimes, even after the narcissist is gone, their voice still lingers in your head. You leave the relationship, you quit the job, you block the number, but they're programming. That internalized self-doubt. That echo of you're not good enough, or you're too much, or you'll never make it without me. That sticks around if you're not intentional about removing it. That's why healing isn't just about getting away, it's about getting clear. It's about looking in the mirror and asking, who did I become while I was surviving that environment? What habits did I pick up just to keep the peace? What parts of myself did I silence just to avoid triggering them? What dreams did I put on the shelf because they said I wasn't capable? And here's the truth. The longer you stay attached to their narrative, the more you delay your own breakthrough. You can't build a powerful life with broken blueprints. You've got to rewrite the story. You've got to take back the pen. You've got to stop telling their version of who you are and start reclaiming your own. This is where a lot of people get stuck. They're out of the toxic situation, but they're still operating with a mindset shaped by it. They've stopped being abused, but they haven't started fully living. And let me be clear, survival is not the same as healing. Surviving just means you made it through. Healing means you learned how to thrive after. You thrive by choosing purpose. You thrive by reconnecting with your core. By reminding yourself, I was never too much, I was just too real for someone who couldn't handle truth. I was never hard to love, I was just inconvenient for someone who only knew how to take. I was never broken, I was being broken down by someone who feared my wholeness. And when you start to believe that, when you stop walking like a wounded version of yourself and start showing up like the warrior you become, everything changes. Because narcissists don't just want to hurt you in the moment, they want you to carry the wound after they're gone. They want you stuck in a loop, replaying the hurt, reliving the shame, second-guessing every move. But what happens when you decide you're not going to carry it anymore? What happens when you wake up and say, I'm done being defined by what hurt me. I'm done shrinking just to feel safe. I'm done carrying someone else's insecurity as if it's my truth. That's the moment you stop letting narcissists win, not just because you got away from them, but because you became someone they could never manipulate again. And no, this isn't about becoming hard. This isn't about building walls or never trusting anyone again. This is about building wisdom. It's about discernment. It's about standing in your power with clarity, knowing that your kindness isn't a weakness, it's a choice. Your softness isn't naive, it's grounded. And your love, it's no longer for sale to the lowest bidder. You don't owe the world a version of you that makes others comfortable. You owe yourself the freedom to be fully, unapologetically alive. Not guarded, not anxious, not on edge. Brooded, centered, whole. Because once you step into that energy, narcissists can't reach you. They can't bait you, they can't break you, they can't own any part of you. And that's how you win. Every single time.